Hi everyone, my name is Karen, this is my channel RatherBeReading, and today I'm bringing to you my October marked as to read video. So my marked as to read videos is a series of videos where I go through all of the books that I was inspired to mark as to read on Goodreads over the past month. So talk about what the book is, why I'm excited about it, where I heard about it, etc. Now this is not a TBR. Yes, I am interested in all of these books and I want to read them all eventually, but I want to read like a million other books. So yes, I am interested, and if I can get my hands on copies, like I will read them. I'm excited about all of them, but it's not a book that I can tell you I'm going to be getting to in the next like couple of months or even the next couple of years. I just don't know, but they are all books that I'm excited to mark as to read. So let's talk about them. So I've got 11 books that I marked as to read in October. So the first one is Things We Didn't Know About When I Was a Girl by Jeannie Vanasco. So this one, if you just watched my haul video, you'll see I actually hauled this month as well. I managed to get my hands on an e-copy, an ebook. So I was recommended this book by The Story Keeper, who's one of my subscribers, as a book that they thought I'd be interested in, and I definitely am. Hence why after I marked it as to read and I saw it on deal, I also bought it. Because it's non-fiction and it's about a woman who was raped as a teenager, I think by a male friend of hers, and it's then several, like 14 years later, she's still really struggling with the aftermath of that event. And I believe that she makes contact with her rapist to like discuss what happened and try to move on with her life, and it just sounds really, really interesting. The next one that I marked as to read is The Chain by Adrienne McKinty. Now, you may have seen this going around BookTube quite a lot over this past month. I can't remember who the first person I heard talk about it was, but I was in a lot of people were reading it for like spooky October reads. And I can see why, because the premise is so interesting. So this is a thriller about a person who gets a call that their kid has been kidnapped. But in addition to having to pay a ransom, they also have to, in order to get their kid back, have to kidnap another person's child and then convince that person to kidnap another person's child and like keep the chain going. It just sounds like that premise is just so like interesting. I've never really heard a premise like that before, so definitely very interested in that. The next one that I marked as to read is A Double Life by Flynn Berry. So I read Flynn Berry's debut novel in October, Under the Harrow. And even though I didn't love that book, like I had some issues with it, I was very intrigued by the writing and like the real psychological nature of that book. And so I had a look at their other releases and saw this one and was very interested in this as well. Because this is a thriller about a woman who's like quite a prestigious doctor, it's like doing really well for herself, but is also the daughter of a notorious murderer and like people don't know that she's that person's daughter. And so it's someone who everyone thinks did this crime, but then the person disappeared. And I think the main character's mother always proclaimed the father's innocence, but everyone thinks that he did it. And then I think the police knock on her door one day and say they've found her father. And then so it's about that and like whether he did it, whether he didn't do it. Just sounded very, very interesting. Next, we have a book that I heard about from Russell over at Ink and Paper blog. Russell's channel is one that I've just been getting into recently. As a channel, I've been like watching a bunch of his like kind of I always start like further back and then work my way up to their more recent videos, but his is a channel that I hadn't watched before and I've recently discovered. And so this book that he talked about was called Say, Say, Say by Lila Savage. This is not necessarily one that I would usually be interested in. Not necessarily not interested in, but it's literary fiction, which can be, sometimes I feel too dumb to read literary fiction, let's just be real. But this one sounded very, very intriguing. And Russell just has a way of talking about books that just makes me want to read them. He speaks so eloquently and he just makes every book he talks about sound so interesting. So this is a literary fiction about a woman who gets drawn into this elderly couple's life. She's basically hired by the husband to care for the wife. And I think it's about how them and their relationship of the couple like affect her life and all of that. I don't really know too much about it apart from that. Like I said, Russell just made it sound really interesting. Next is a book that I heard about over on Lala from Books and Lala's channel, and that is Michigan versus the Boys by Carrie S. Allen. So this is, I think, YA contemporary, and it's basically about a girl who plays hockey but the female hockey team at her school gets cancelled, and so she insists on joining the boys' school. But I think it's not like, so it kind of reminds me of like She's the Man, that movie, which I love, but I think it's more like hard hitting than that. It's about like the hazing and everything that she undergoes as trying to like get onto this boys' team, and the discrimination that she receives as a girl, or that type of thing. It just sounded very interesting. Next is a book that I heard about from Jen over at Iffa's Inklings, and that is The House by Christina Lauren. Now, Christina Lauren is obviously an author that I'm familiar with. I've read a couple of her books. Of their books. Christina Lauren is a writing duo, and they publish mainly like romance, and you know, they're very popular on BookTube. But I had never heard of this book before, and it's YA, and it's kind of like a YA horror. I think it does have a heavy romantic element to it, but then like it has like a horror element as well, and it's something to do with like a house that's alive or kind of haunted. I'm not too sure. I was just very intrigued that Christina Lauren had like kind of a horror-ish type book, and so I wanted to read it, and so I marked that as to read. Next, we have another book that I heard about from Russell over at Ink and Paper Blog, and that is The Need by Helen Phillips. So this was a National Book Award finalist, which is interesting because I just talked about, if you saw my haul video, I talked about the National Book Award and how there's a prompt for that in the Around the Year and 52 books this year. And how I looked through a lot of past year's nominees and winners, and it doesn't seem like a type of prize that's really for me because I had hardly heard of most of those books. I wasn't interested in most of those books. But he talked about this book, and it sounds so interesting. So it's called, did I say what it was? It's The Need by Helen Phillips, in case I didn't. So this is basically about a home invasion. So this woman's home is invaded, and she's got children, and I think a husband. But the people who invade her home, or the person or people, I'm not sure if it's one or more, seem to know more about her and her family than like what you would think that they would. So it just sounded very intriguing. Having said that, the average star rating for this on Goodreads is like a 3.2, which is super low, but I'm very intrigued by the synopsis. Next, we have a book that I heard about from Kat over at Biblio Obscura, and that is To Feel Stuff by Andrea Siegel. So this is a book about a woman who is like constantly ill. She's got like chronic illness. She just is always coming down with these different things, is in and out of hospital constantly, and she's like put into hospital, and while she's in hospital she forms this relationship with another patient. Then something happens with that, and then she starts to see ghosts. I'm not really sure. Kat just made it sound really interesting, and so I marked that as to read. And then the final 3 books that I marked as to read over this past month were all ones that were on a Goodreads blog post about books hitting shelves over the next however many days. And I was interested in 3 of the ones on this particular post. The first is The Lost Causes of Bleak Creek by Rhett McLaughlin and Link Neal. Now, I marked this as to read, and then I heard a couple of people talk about it on BookTube since then, and I realized that the authors of this is Rhett and Link, the like TV personalities. Is it TV? They're from Good Mythical Morning. I actually do watch clips of theirs sometimes, like on Facebook. It's not a show that we have here in Australia, but I have seen clips of them on Facebook, and I do quite enjoy them. And this is like their first foray into fiction, and it's like mystery horror. It is set in a small town in North Carolina in the 90s. I can't remember too much about it apart from that, but that was enough. Like I said, I was intrigued about it before I realized that it was by Rhett and Link, so I marked that as to read. Then we had a book called The In-Betweens, The Spiritualists, Mediums, and Legends of Camp Etna by Mira Peterson. So this is a non-fiction book, and I think it's part memoir, but it looks at like spiritualism and mediums, and I think it starts off looking at these 2 sisters from like the 1800s who like believed that they could talk to the dead, and like looks at that throughout history and how that's like affected like the world and stuff like that, like kind of spiritualism, philosophy kind of. It just sounded very interesting, and I was intrigued by it. And then the final book from that blog post, and the final book that I marked as to read in October, is Full Disclosure by Cameron Garrett. So this is a YA novel, and it's about a girl who is HIV positive. And that was enough for me to mark it as to read, because I've never seen that like represented in like YA fiction. So she's HIV positive, and I think she started at a new school. And she is interested in getting involved in this like romance with this boy, but she's reluctant to tell him that she's HIV positive because the last time that she told someone, there was this huge fallout from that, and then they start to form a romance, and it seems like maybe like sex is going to be a possibility in future, and so she's grappling with divulging to this boy that she is dating that she is HIV positive. Like I say, it's just something I've never seen represented in fiction before, and I'm very, very intrigued about that. So that's it. I got through these really quickly for some reason, but those are all of the books that I marked as to read in October. I would love to chat with you guys in the comments down below if you've read any of them, or a lot of these I think are like future releases, if you've heard about them, if you're interested in them, or if you have any more further recommendations that you think would cause me to mark them as to read on Goodreads. I would love to hear about them. Please like this video if you liked it. Please subscribe if you want to see more from my channel. That is all I have for this video today. Bye guys!